This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, Kate Floss, citizen historian, subject lawyer, a subject fighter for the rights of Almighty God, with the knowledge that we, each and every one of us, is an individual, as an Almighty God in our own right. Ye are all gods, and I am a God in my own right. When we're all joined together, we're called Almighty God, and then we rule the 1688 will and marry the will of the people, where we keep our leaders and all people under the restrictions of Almighty God to protect us all. Now, you're looking over my shoulder here, you'll see Queen Elizabeth II. This man here is a famous man called Tamati Wakanene. And what a lot of you don't know is that Queen Victoria over here, Tamati Wakanene, teamed up, the both of them teamed up in the years between 1840 through to 1871, I think it was, to remove the Jacobite rule of the Protestant people. Now, I did do a video last week about the Protestant people, and I'll just share some of the screen. Last week when we talked about the Declaration of Our Birth, the Declaration of Our Birth was made under Robert the Bruce, a king called Robert the Bruce, and what they were fighting for was the divine right of kings, backed by the Catholic Church and the Jewish religion. The Jews were the people. I'll just go back a little bit in history, a little bit more here. At some point in our history, all the religions got together and they said that they were charging people, they were lending people money on their lands, and then what they were doing was increasing the rate of the money lent day by day, and the people had no control of this increase. This was at a time when there were no taxes. So this was the way that the religions got money back in those times. Now, what they realized was that the poor people they were not able to pay the interest on these loans, and they lost their land. They were sent out into the forest, and they were landless, and they ended up starving because they had nothing. And the religions took all of the lands from them. Well, all the leaders got together at some point, and they said, okay, it's not fair of us to give them loans for their land and charge them interest. So they all made a pact that they were not going to charge interest. There was only going to be a fixed interest. They weren't going to have these interests where they could change daily on the people, and they were going to keep this interest at a reasonable rate so that the people could pay it back. Not only that, a lot of people were paying back the money, and when they went to collect their land deed or collect their land back, the people that they paid the money to said, no, you didn't pay that money. And so all the religions made a pact, but one of the religions that did not join this pact were the Jewish. So the Jewish and the Catholics, so the Jews were the only ones that were allowed to continue this practice, and they're in the Magna Carta of collecting this interest and having the interest go up and down. And so the Catholics joined up with the Jews when the Martin Luther rose up against the religions, and the Protestants said, we want to be free and we don't want to be under the church laws. We want to make our own laws and we want to govern ourselves. Then proceeded the 30 Years' War of the religions, trying to suppress the Protestant people. Now, the Protestants, 50% of the Germanic population who wanted to be Protestants and wanted to be free to govern themselves, spilled over into England, Scotland, and Ireland. Now, over in England, Scotland, and Ireland, we had the Catholics and the Jews working together. And what they had discovered at some point was that the entire country of England had been bought up by the Jews, and that the actual English people didn't own any. The king came in and he threw all the Catholics out, all the Jews out, and then he opened up a land office and he said, right, we're going to have land deeds. There would be 2 land deeds. That's how you know land deeds, because they have the serrated edge. One land deed will stand the office, and one land deed will go to the person. when the person wants to get a loan on that land deed, they would come to the office and they would put that land deed into the box together with the other land deed. And when he paid back the money, it was paid back to the land office, who kept the record. And when the land deed was paid back, he would then give that land deed back. And these were called the exchequers. And they would have, one was owned by the Catholics, one was owned by the one key to the chest of the land deeds was owned by the Catholics, one was owned by the Jews, and another key was owned by the independent body that kept a check on all of them. So they were called the exchequers. It's pretty rudimentary what I'm telling you. But anyway, the reason why they had done that is because the English were landless because of this borrowing and these interest rates and all of that. Now, the German Protestants all spilled over into England, Scotland, and Ireland, and they were called German Lollards. And when the king and the Protestant people tried to get the Catholics and the Jews and all of them out, they were called Jacobites. So it was Protestants. There was kind of a mix. The Jacobites were a mix of the kings, the divine kings that believed that they had the right to rule by their birth. The Catholics and the Jews were all joined up together against the Protestants and the king that was restricted under a parliament that was governed by us. So I did do a song. I'll go to share screen here. Hang on, I'll go to my share screen here. And I did do a song, which was called, in my song, it was called the, In my song, it was called the Declaration of Our Birth. Now, if you're from Scotland, Ireland, and England, I really, really want you to focus, because that I told you about Tamati Wakandane and Queen Victoria teaming up to get the Jacobites. When the Jacobites were thrown out of England, Scotland, and Ireland, those Jacobites then went over to New Zealand, Australia, America, and Canada, and over to South Africa. So Queen Victoria teamed up with Tamati Wakandane in 1840. Now, in 1835, when the Declaration of Our Birth was being created by the Jacobite peoples, which was the Catholics, Jewish, and Kings all joined into one, when the Declaration of Our Birth was being created, at that same time, the Declaration of Independence, called the Whaki Pūtanga from New Zealand, was being created with the native chiefs, and these kinds of things were also being created over in America and over in Australia. So there's this huge war that's been going on for hundreds of years. I'm here to tell you the war hasn't ended. The Jacobites have risen up, and that's who we're fighting against. It's the same Protestant, Catholic, Jacobite war that's going on. Now remember, we had Protestant kings, we didn't. We had only Protestant queens. And to my knowledge, Prince Charles or King Charles perhaps is the first Protestant king. All our kings, all our queens were Protestant queens. I'm not quite sure, don't quote me on that. But previously to that, all the kings were Jacobite kings. Now, Princess Diana was a Jacobite, and her children are half Protestant, half Jacobite. Just thought I'd let you know that little tidbit of information. Now, if you go onto my Kate Floss YouTube, we really want people to join the Kate Floss YouTube. We're at 694. We're trying to get 700. But if you go onto the Kate Floss YouTube, you're going to see the Declaration of Our Birth and Martin Luther. And I've posted on there the Martin Luther, the 30 Years' War, the Reformation, Robert the Bruce, and the Germanic people, as all English comes from the Germanic languages. Now, around that Protestant time, I'll just show you here These were the Protestants that were being burned alive for not wanting to be under the church doctrines and not wanting all their lands. They didn't want all their lands. This is basically it. They didn't want all of their pure title lands to be owned by the church. That's basically what was going on. And for that, they were being burned at the stake. Many thousands and thousands of people were burned alive. And that's how the Jacobites and the religions and the kings dealt with all of the Protestant people, burned them at the stake. There were many, many tortures that they were subjected to. Here we've got three people subjected, so you can go and have a look at that. And then if you see on this one here, this is where the Protestants were being hung in the village. They used to call us non-Christians. Now we're called non-Maori, non-ethnic, many nons, but they did used to call us non-Christians. I don't know if you can see it here, but here they are all being hung by the tree. Here's another group of them being hung, and what you can see is the religious man climbing up the stairs with his cross, saying that they only allowed the three religions. There was the Catholic, there was the Jewish, and there was the Islamic. And anybody that wanted to not be subjected to having all their lands taken by those religions, or anybody that wanted to start a new religion, they were hung in trees, or they were hung like this. This was all due to the 40 Years' War. People were burned, people were hung. And so this is all what was going on at that time. So I did do the song of the Declaration of Arbroath, and then there was a rising up. So then what happened was there was a rising up of the Scottish, the English, the Irish, and they were all predominantly German Protestants that had been spilled over from the 30 Years' War, fighting the religions for decades upon decades. They'd all gone on the run, and they went into Scotland, Ireland, and then what they did was to protect the Scottish, the Irish, and the English, to protect their lands, they made a covenant that no Protestants, this was only done to Protestant people. Protestant people were never allowed to purchase pure title land. And that's why they scooped up hundreds of thousands of Protestant people and shipped them out to America, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, because they were not permitted to purchase the pure title lands. But the people that were permitted were Catholics, Jews, and Islamists. Even to this day, they are permitted to purchase pure title land. So this is kind of the war. I'm just telling you a very rudimentary area of it. But so the English, Scottish, and Irish rose up against the Jacobites to get them out, and they joined with the Protestants to do it. And so the first one was the Declaration of Arbroath, which was Robert the Bruce and all the Jacobites fighting against the Protestants to stop the Protestants from having self-governance and having a king. Now, now in 1688 is when the Protestant law of the Will and Mary came to power, giving us the right to govern over ourselves, but forbidding us the right to buy the pure title land of the English. And the Protestant people became human shields to protect the English, the Scottish, and the Irish against the three religions that wished to take them over to steal all of their pure title lands. So the Protestant people became human shields. And today I'm going to sing you a song called Ye Jacobites by Name. Ye Jacobites by Name. That was sang to get the Jacobites out. So we had the Declaration of Arbroath, right? And now we're going to do the, this song is called Ye Jacobites by Name. And I'm not sure who is the writer of this Jacobites song, but hang on. So I'll tell you this in a minute. Oh, but I wanted to show you. All right, I'll share screen. So this is one of the people that was on the Jacobite song, and this is what he had to say, which will help you a bit better than how I'm explaining it. He says, when a Scot supported the Jacobite cause, when he was asked to toast the king in a public place, he would make sure that he had a glass of water on the table over which he would raise his real drink. By doing this, he was in effect toasting the king over the water, the one in exile. So there were two kings, all right? There was the King James that was thrown out, and he was a Jacobite king, and he was thrown out of England, and they brought in the King of Orange, the Prince and Princess of Orange, who were Protestant king, a Protestant king and a Protestant queen. But they, in order to govern, had to sign the 1688 Bill of Rights that we would be allowed to govern ourselves and that they would be restricted in their rule and that they could be removed. Now, that is the difference between the Jacobite king that left and the Protestant kings and queens that came in, because the Jacobite king had divine right by his birth, and he was ruled by the Catholic and Jewish religions, and he had the divine right of birth, and nobody could, to throw him out was the death penalty. So that was the Jacobite king. He was the one that abdicated and left, and it was the Protestant king and queen that came in to replace who was restricted. And so the Scottish that wanted to continue the Jacobite line of kings, they toasted the king over the water. And then so that's how you knew. And instead of the one that was actually on the throne, which was the Prince of Orange, that way he could not be charged with making a treasonous statement. For you Scottish rebels, I also recommend Connie Dover's version of Lady Keith's Lament, which contains a lot of history and social implications. The Whigs detested the Jacobites. Jacobite originally meant supporter of James. The Jacobite comes from the word Jacobus, which is Latin for both James and Jacob. Bonnie Prince Charles's grandfather was King James II of England, who was overthrown in 1688 and was finally defeated by his own son-in-law, the Dutchman William of Orange. So he was the father of Princess Mary, who was married to William of Orange in Ireland in 1690 in the Battle of Boyne. Interestingly, before James II became king, he was the Duke of Albany and York, in whose honor, so New York is named after a Jacobite king, as well as New York's capital of Albany. The colony's name was renamed from New Amsterdam, which was probably named after William of Orange, after the British defeated the Dutch during the reign of his brother, King Charles II. So there's a whole lot of stuff in there that's very difficult for everybody to understand. But what it's just basically saying is there was the Protestants through Martin Luther, the Protestants through Martin Luther rose up against all the religions to govern themselves, and that was a 30 Years' War. They spilled out over into England, Scotland, and Ireland, who also were just starting to realize that they were under these religious laws and that all their lands had been taken by these three religions. All their pure title, allodial land, was gone, kaput, gone, owned by those three religions. They were called peon slaves. They joined up with the Protestants to get the Jacobite king out. They managed to get the Jacobite king out, who was King James, who abdicated They brought in his daughter, who was a Protestant, Princess Mary, who was married to Prince William, who was also a Protestant, but put them under restrictions of the 1688 Bill of Rights. And so now I'm going to sing you. So this is when Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland and parts of England joined together and used the Protestants as human shields by the 1688 Bill of Rights. So I'll sing you this song here that I would like you to listen to, okay? So I'm going to share. I'll share the entire screen now. So I think you can see my entire screen here. And I'm going to sing you this song that I want you to see. So I'll put up the name of the singer of the song. Anyway, it's called, we did the Declaration of Our Birth. And whenever you're thinking of the Declaration of Our Birth, don't forget that we're remembering the Declaration of Independence of New Zealand, which was set up by the Jacobite peoples. The Jacobites left England. Let's just remember the Declaration of Our Birth of 1835, 1820 was exactly the same time that all of those Jacobites turned up in New Zealand, wrote a language for the New Zealanders, and came out with the Declaration of Independence. It was all done at exactly the same point in time. We're going to have to go back and look at it all together. So stay with me if you're from Scotland, Ireland, England, New Zealand, Australia. Stay with me because there's a lot to tell you about that. So this was the Declaration of Our Birth song that was in favour of the Jacobite kings, and this was the Jacobite song which was wanting them to get out. And here's what it says: your doctrines I'm on blank. You shall hear. He says we don't want to be under the church laws of the Catholics, Islamists, or the Jewish, because their laws had burning laws, cruel punishments, weren't allowed to speak against them, and also that they owned each state and they divided up the states amongst themselves. He says we want to have our own laws, and then he says, let your schemes alone in the state. So leave your schemes and get them out of our state. And it says, leave the man undone to his fate. So stop trying to control us with your religious laws, and let us be under God and be subjected to our own fates. We can manage ourselves, we can rule ourselves, and let us be destined to our own faith as God, in our own fate as God intended for us. So here I'm going to sing this song for you. Here's something, I've got some pictures here as well for you. See if you can do it. Now this picture here is from the Fabian Society. Okay, so the Fabian Society. This is from the Fabian Society. I have to get this right, don't I? So this is from the Fabian Society, and they were Jacobites that sent up to send themselves out into the world, and most of our leaders come from the Fabian Society. All of the leaders that I'm putting up before you are not Protestants. They're either Catholic, they're Jewish, they're either Catholic, Jewish, or they're Hindu, except for there's a couple of leaders there that are not any of those, and I'm not actually sure what they are or where they stand. There's a couple near the end, but all the leaders that are in our parliaments of England, Ireland, Scotland, Canada, America, Australia, and New Zealand, all of them are Jacobites, Catholics, Jews, and come from the Jacobite king line is what they support. Okay, so have a look here what I've got to throw up here. You Jacobites by name, lend an ear, lend an ear. You Jacobites by name, lend an ear. You Jacobites by name. Your doctrines I mumbling, you shall hear, you shall hear. Your doctrines I mumbling, you shall hear. What is right and what is wrong? By the law, by the law. What is right and what is wrong? By the law. What is right and what is wrong? The short sword and the length. How we come and a strength for to draw, for to draw. How we come and a strength for to draw. You Jacobites by name, lend an ear, lend an ear. You Jacobites by name, lend an ear. Ye Jacobites by name, your faults I will proclaim. Your doctrines I mumbling, you shall hear, you shall hear. Your doctrines I mumbling, you shall hear. What makes heroic strife? Fade the fire, fade the fire. What makes heroic strife? Fade the fire. What makes heroic strife? To fend the assassin's knife, or hunt a parent's life with bloody war, bloody war. Or hunt a parent's life with bloody war. You Jacobites by name, lend an ear, lend an ear. You Jacobites by name, lend an ear. You Jacobites by name, your doctrines I will proclaim. Your doctrines I mumbling, you shall hear, you shall hear. Your doctrines I mumbling, you shall hear. They led to another hymn. Not sure if he's a Jacobite. Some people you just don't know which side they're on. Sometimes I like him. Sometimes I'm not so sure. Here's the other one here. He's been fighting for the 1688. We don't know about these two. Let your schemes alone in the state, in the state. Then let your schemes alone in the state. Then let your schemes alone adore the rising sun. And leave a man undone to his fate, to his fate. And leave a man undone to his fate. Ye Jacobites by name, lend an ear, lend an ear. Ye Jacobites by name, lend an ear. Ye Jacobites by name, your faults I will proclaim. Your doctrines I mumbling, you shall hear, you shall hear. Your doctrines I mumbling, you shall hear. So the next one that we're going to do for you is the wee bit German lairdy. So this was when the Irish people rose up against the Protestant. They called us German lairdies. Now the German people have been under attack for thousands of years, ever since they rose up with the Protestant Reformation. The Germanic people have been under attack and abused, but a lot of times you've got to know that there's two sides, right? So you go over to Scotland, you've got, now I did want to just show this one here. You can see that the Prime Minister of England is now a Hindu Indian, and he's not a Protestant, and he's supposed to be a Protestant, and no foreigners are permitted under the 1688 will and Mary, no foreigners are permitted to govern over us, or anybody of these religions, of the devout, the leaders of Hinduism, Catholicism, Judaism. They're not supposed to be in our parliament. Now you look up there, he's got India. This, as soon as he was sworn in, he didn't contact any of the people of the Commonwealth country. That's what God said. God said, you'll know them by their fruits. Who did he contact when he was sworn in? He contacted the leader of India. Yeah. And that's what God says. You'll know them by their fruits. You'll know where their allegiance lies. And you can look here that he's got here India, and then he's got the orange, which is the Irish orange, and the greens, which is the Irish green. And that's the Protestants versus the Catholics. All caught up, we're all caught up in this war of the Protestants versus the Catholics, versus the Jacobites, versus the orange kings and queens that are elected and the Jacobite kings that have their ownership by birth. So that's we're all caught up in this big battle. Now I'm staying with, I'm just staying with the Protestant king and the Protestant queen, the Prince of Orange and the Princess of Orange. That's who I'm following. I may change at a later date. I'm not quite sure, but what you've all got to do is figure out what your lane is. Once you figure out what your lane is, and once you figure out that your country is at war from within, and once you figure out whether you're in the Protestant lane or whether you're in the Jacobite lane or whichever lane that you're going to be in, you know that the people that are not in those lanes are not in your lane. And that's why I'm not having such a problem here, because I'm knowing which lane I'm in. If I do decide to jump lanes, I'll be knowing why I'm jumping lanes, and I'll be knowing which lane exactly that I'm jumping into. So you've got to keep yourself in your own state, your own godly state, under Almighty God's protections is what you've got to do. So my spirit leader is Tamati Wakanene and Queen Victoria. There's more stories coming to tell you about the German Lollards, and I'll have to do another video about our subject status being removed from us. Our right to buy a allodial land. That's a whole nother video. We've got to do the German Lollards. If you're from Scotland, England, Ireland, all right, you've got to focus on New Zealand, because I've got to tell you about this treaty, the Treaty of Waitangi, the German settlers' ordinances, Tamati Wakanene's ordinance, together with the 1835 Declaration of Independence that was set up by the Jacobites, by the way, together with the Declaration of Birth. These documents are all tied in together, all right? So not a one of them can be separated. So this is where you're having a problem in Scotland, Ireland, Northern Ireland, and England. This is where you're having a problem, because you're not realizing that your three countries are bound to New Zealand. Not so much Australia, not so much Canada, but you are bound to New Zealand by Tamati Wakanene. And he is on 3 royal coins, 3 of them. So I'll post that up at a later date as well. His name is Tamati Wakanene, and you're going to be really surprised when you find out what his name means and where I think, in my conspiracy theory, it comes from. So know what your lane is. It's Jacobites versus, so it's Jacobites versus the Prince of Orange. It's Catholics, Jews, and Islamists, and Hindus versus Protestants. So those are your lanes that you've got to choose from. There are people that don't want to be in any lane. If you're not in any lane, you come under the Protestant lane, really. But if you're not in any lane, you're going to get dragged down by one of the lanes, because whoever wins, we're in a holy war. This is a holy war, and it's focused on the Anglo-Saxon countries, where they sent thousands of Protestants out to combat the Jacobite invasion. And it was actually also, the actual invasion started in India. In an actual fact, originally, it was India that were in control of the Asian countries. And so there's a whole nother, and New Zealand as well, and Australia as well. And now we have an Indian Prime Minister over in England there. We've got to go and look at all what went on in our history, starting at the time. I started around about the year 1000. So we've all got to do that. So hang in there, you Protestants, ye Jacobites by name. Leave the man to the fate and get out of our parliaments. We don't want you in our parliaments. We don't want you in our courts. We don't want you having any power over us whatsoever. We want to be able to have the right to govern ourselves and stop taking all our tax money. See, all our tax money has been robbed from us, billions upon billions of dollars. That's all going into the Jacobite coffers. So the Jacobites are enjoying a great wealthy time. And anyone that's a Protestant, you're not a part of it, and you won't ever be allowed to be a part of it. And so you might as well start fighting for your kids. Fight for your kids. All right, that's Kate Floss signing out. Have a great day. Stop recording. Let's just send her up there laughing. Let's get a picture.